Well, hi everybody. Welcome to my first ever virtual garden tour of the Pollinator Paradise Garden at Chatham Mills in Pittsburgh. I thought this would be a great way to share some of my favorite plants and give you an idea of what's happening in the garden in the month of June. The Pollinator Paradise Garden is a project of the Chatham County Center of North Carolina Cooperative Extension. It's a demonstration garden intended to showcase our native plants and how to create pollinator habitat in the Piedmont of North Carolina. My name is Debbie Roos, and I'm one of the agriculture agents with the Chatham County Center of North Carolina Cooperative Extension. I created the garden back in 2008, and it's since grown to include over 220 unique species, and about 85% of them are native to North Carolina. I maintain the garden with the help of a really awesome group of volunteers. The beds in the Pollinator Paradise Garden are spread throughout the property. Some of them border sidewalks, some of them border lawns, and some of them are even parking lot islands. This is one of the beds that mark the entrance to the Chatham Mills complex. I've got 8 different species of milkweed in the garden. This is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. Sometimes I like to call it bumblebee weed because you can see it's a real favorite with the bumblebees. Pollinator gardens provide habitat for a lot of cool natural enemies and predators like this green lynx spider, which is making a meal out of a bee it found on this coneflower. I love this combo of the black-eyed Susan and the butterfly weed with some blanket flower in this bed. I have several species of Monarda in the garden. This is Monarda cleanopodia, also called white bergamot or basil bee balm. And you can see the bumblebees love it. One of my all-time favorite native shrubs is the button bush. And I love it so much because it's got a really cool white flower. And also it blooms for 4 months from June to September. Even though it's known as a wetland plant, I've found it to be quite adaptable and it does really well in these dry beds. I'm a big fan of the blazing stars. That's that purple plant up front called Liatris spicata. I have several different species of Liatris in the garden. Even though it can be tall up to 5 or 6 feet, it's a see-through plant, which means you can even put it up front because you can see past it. Looks really nice with the coneflowers here. I love this shot of the trellis bed where the white Culver's root has a really prominent spot. Culver's root is also known as a wetland plant, but I found it does well in a regular dry bed. It's called Veronicastrum virginicum, and it blooms for a really long time and attracts a lot of different pollinators. You can see behind it that tall yellow plant is a cup plant, Silphium perfoliatum. And here's another view of the tall cup plant in the background. It can get 8 to 10 feet high. It's been combined here with some bee balm and coneflowers. Butterflies like this eastern tiger swallowtail love silphiums, and so do the birds in the fall when they get the seed. Both honeybees and our native bees, like the sunflower bee, also love the silphiums, the cup plant. Even though cup plant's tall, sometimes it falls down and blends well with the lower perennials. And now you can see why Silphium perfoliatum is called cup plant. The opposite leaves form a cup around the stem that holds water, and you can sometimes see birds drinking from it. The bee balm is always stunning in the spring and early summer. This is Monarda fistulosa Claire Grace. And you can see why bee balm is called bee balm. It's beloved by both the honeybees and the native bees. Another example of one of the cool predators you'll find in the pollinator garden. This is a wheelbug nymph. A wheelbug is our largest assassin bug, and it's eating a Japanese beetle. We had quite a bit of rain in some parts of June, up to 4 or 5 inches in some weeks. This is a rainy day shot of one of the beds. I love walking around during the rain and seeing where the bees are hiding out. Here's a bumblebee on buttonbush. Another bumblebee, very soggy one on coneflower. And apparently the liatris is a pretty good hiding spot for this bumblebee. This bumblebee's hanging on to the spotted bee balm, the Monarda fruticulosa. This shot is the main entrance to Chatham Mills from the Highway 15501. Another shot of that same bed. I call this one the driveway bed. You can see the tall cup plant in the middle there. I love the white wild indigo, the Baptisia alba, because it blooms later than the other native Baptisias. You can see the bee blossom and the poppy mallow in this shot with some other perennials. This is prairie poppy mallow, one of the Caloroe species. It's a Midwestern native and really a favorite of the bees. I'm standing here at the end of the trellis bed, so you can see the native climbing aster vine on the trellis in the background there. The orange coneflower, Rudbeckia fulgida, makes a really nice display in June. The Rudbeckia is a nice hunting ground for predators like this assassin bug nymph, and they'll make very deliberate movements moving around the top of the flowers looking for pollinators that land on the flowers. This is the trellis bed that's marking the entrance to Chatham Mills. Another view of the trellis bed. A close-up of the front of the trellis bed at the edge showing the purple prairie clover, Dahlia purpurea, and you can see how popular it is with the bees. The far end of that same bed has a really nice combo of coneflowers and bee balm and Culver's root. And again, that Culver's root, the Veronicastrum virginicum, is just one of my favorites. It has a really long bloom period and loved by butterflies and bees. The coneflowers look great with the blue Stokes asters. This leafcutter bee is collecting some pollen from the Stokes aster. This is Stokesia laevis, a cultivar called Peachy's Pick. Another great shrub to have in your pollinator garden is the St. John's wort, Hypericum frondosum. St. John's wort is a medicinal plant, and it is really loved by the bumblebees and the honeybees, and they get kind of frantic when they're foraging on the flowers, but I love to watch them. One of the parking lot islands at the edge of the property, this gets a lot of deer pressure, so I've had to keep that in mind, of course, with the plant species selection. This bed has some shrubs in it like beautyberry and possum haw and also spicebush. We put up a cedar trellis on this pine tree, so I had more space for vines like this pipe vine. And the whole reason I planted the pipe vine, of course, was to attract the pipe vine swallowtail butterfly. It's a host plant for it. And here's some of the caterpillars. This is the second generation of these caterpillars this year. These are beautiful caterpillars, and you can see they're going to town on the leaves of the pipe vine. And again, we'll have several generations, and then they're very active, and they'll usually leave the host to pupate somewhere else. This parking lot island is one of my favorites in the spring, a little earlier than this shot, with the blue star and the coneflowers and the liatris and the baptisias. It's really nice. I'm going to finish up the tour here with our newest bed on the far end of the property. This is what I call the milkweed bed. This is what the bed looked like 2 years ago. It had 3 mature Japanese Zelkova trees and some juniper in it. And we removed those trees and the juniper to make way for some nice native plants. Prior to removing the trees, I had planted at the front edge of this bed. So now the back end was ready to be planted. And this is what it looks like now. It's really filling in very nicely. This is a side view of that bed. It's got a lot of common milkweed in it and many different other perennials. This shows the front edge of that bed. So this is again is a high deer pressure area, so I had to keep that in mind with my plant selection. The liatris here has really gone to town and seeded in quite a bit, but it's not a problem for me, and certainly you can see the bees really enjoy it as well. This is the liatris spicata. In this shot, we've got a nice combination of coneflower, blanket flower. The yellow is the world tick seed, and then up front is the lemon bee balm. We see here a bumblebee foraging on the lemon bee balm. We're still in that same bed here, and in the foreground is a really cool shrub called dwarf indigo bush, Amorpha herbacea. It's one of my favorites, and the bees love it. Here's another shot of the blooms of the dwarf indigo bush. It looks really nice combined with the spotted bee balm. I worked hard for this plant here. This is one of our native thistles, a field thistle called Cirsium discolor, not available in nurseries. So I got the seed and direct seeded it and waited a couple of years, and it finally bloomed. Really excited to see it. Thistles get a bad rap because when people think of thistles, they think of the thistles they see on the roadside, which are not native and are invasive. But this here is a native thistle, and the bees love it, as do the butterflies. So I'm really excited to have it in the garden. And now that it's flowered, it should seed in and provide great resources for pollinators and also birds, which will use the fluffy seed down for their nest. I hope you have enjoyed this virtual garden tour. Please make time to visit the garden website. I've got tons of information there, including a list of all the plants in the garden, hundreds and hundreds of photos and what's in bloom list and fact sheets, and also a list of the nurseries where I get my plants. So lots of information for you there to check out. And the garden is always open for visitors.